The premiere lights buzzed above the city like electric stars, suspended in motionless celebration. Outside the Grand Theater, everything gleamed: the polished marble steps, the shining lenses of photographers, the velvet rope strung tight like red silk veins, guiding the flow of celebrity. Timothée Chalamet had just stepped onto the carpet. He wore it well, a quiet elegance, a kind of poetic gravity. No loud poses. No exaggerated gestures. Just soft smiles and small nods that made every camera focus a little tighter. He belonged in the spotlight. And yet, even as it wrapped around him, he didn't seem to need it. He walked slowly, deliberately, as if part of him was elsewhere. The fans screamed his name, flashbulbs exploded like glittering fireworks, but not far from the velvet ropes, beyond the official media zone, someone stood almost perfectly still. A boy, his shoulders were small, his stance hesitant. His shoes were dusty and mismatched. In his hands, clutched tightly, was a hand-drawn poster, crumpled at the edges, the ink slightly faded but still readable. "You taught me to dream." He didn't shout, he didn't wave. He simply stood, eyes fixed on Timothy with a quiet intensity, the kind of gaze that wasn't looking at a celebrity, but at something far more personal. A security guard nearby glanced toward him and frowned. The boy wasn't where he was supposed to be. No badge. No press pass. Just a fan who had wandered too close. The guard moved in. There was no shouting, no scene. Just a firm hand on the boy's arm, guiding him backward. The boy stumbled slightly, but didn't resist. He said something, barely audible, and pointed to his sign. The guard shook his head. A photographer nearby chuckled. Someone else muttered, "Just get him out of the shot." The boy's grip on the poster tightened. His lips trembled. But he said nothing. Then, his camera slipped from around his neck. An old one, scratched and well-loved. It hit the pavement with a heavy thud, bounced once, and lay still. That's when Timothy turned at first. It seemed casual, a quick glance, perhaps catching the sound, but then he stopped. He looked, not past the crowd. Not above them. Him, the boy didn't know what to do. His cheeks flushed. His hands scrambled to pick up the camera, to lift the sign again. But he was too slow, too flustered. His fingers fumbled, and Timothy began to walk, not toward the next interview station. Not toward the cameras. He moved toward the boy, slowly. Intentionally. Cutting through the red carpet chaos like a silent question. The security guard stiffened. "Mr. Chalamet," but Timothy didn't stop. Didn't speak. He reached the boy. Stopped in front of him. The world seemed to hush just for a moment, and without a word, Timothy gently bent down, picked up the boy's poster, and held it. His eyes scanned the words, then looked back at the boy's face. The boy's lips parted, but no sound came out. Timothy leaned in. Whispered something too soft for anyone else to hear, then he offered his hand, and slowly, shakily, the boy took it. Together, they stepped onto the carpet. Side by side, the cameras were too stunned to flash, and in that strange, sudden quiet, the only thing that seemed real, was the look in Timothy's eyes, not pity, not sympathy. Recognition. As if, somewhere deep inside, he'd seen that boy or someone like him before, but that was a memory for another time. There's a strange kind of silence that follows an unexpected act, the kind where the world keeps moving, but eyes stop, minds pause, and everyone forgets what they were supposed to say next. That's what followed Timothée Chalamet as he led the boy onto the red carpet. Not a single publicist rushed forward, not a camera flashed for nearly 5 seconds, an eternity in premiere time, and when they finally did, it wasn't with the usual frenzy. It was different. Slower. Almost cautious. As if the moment was too fragile to interrupt, the boy walked beside Timothy like someone who had entered the pages of a dream. He held his sign tight against his chest, his other hand still in the actor's. His breathing was shallow. Not from fear, from awe. From not knowing whether to believe what was happening. The crowd didn't know how to react. Some clapped, some whispered, others simply watched. That a few journalists tried shouting questions, but their voices came out awkward, like they didn't belong in the moment. Timothy. Is this your brother? Who is he? Is this a publicity gesture? Timothy didn't answer. He wasn't performing. He was present, and in a space usually built for ego. That presence was louder than any sound. That he leaned into the boy again and said something with a soft smile. The boy nodded. Then Timothy guided him toward the photographers. The sign was visible now, crumpled, torn, but bold. You taught me to dream. A few camera shutters clicked, then more. Suddenly, they were everywhere. But this time, the boy wasn't the outsider being pushed away. That he was the moment. Timothy posed beside him. But not in a glamorized, hand-on-shoulder way. He stood beside him like you'd stand beside someone you respect. Someone you're proud of. And the boy, he glowed. His name was Noah. No one on that carpet knew that yet, but Timothy did. He had learned it just seconds earlier, when the boy's voice finally found the courage to whisper it out. I'm Noah. That was all, and for Timothy, it was enough. After the photos, Timothy knelt beside him once more. You want to watch the movie? He asked quietly. Noah nodded, quickly. Eyes wide. Voice caught in his throat. Timothy turned to one of his assistants, who had finally caught up to the moment and stood watching with an unreadable expression. Can you make sure he gets inside? Front row. The assistant blinked. Of course. And no fuss, Timothy added. Please. As Noah was gently escorted inside, still holding his sign, still glancing back, Timothy turned away from the cameras and headed toward the press section, but his smile was different now, tired. Quiet. Full. Back inside the theater, minutes before the film began, Noah sat in the front row, right in the center. On his lap was a small water bottle someone had brought him, though he hadn't touched it. His hands were still clasped around the poster like it was made of glass. That he looked up at the enormous screen, blinking back disbelief. Then he glanced at the empty seat beside him, reserved for cast, but to Noah, it felt like something else, like a promise. Timothy arrived just seconds before the lights dimmed. He slipped into the seat next to Noah without saying a word. Just looked over, smiled once, and nodded. Noah smiled back. His lips moved, forming a soundless phrase, thank you. Timothy didn't respond. That he didn't have to, because somewhere in his heart, he was trying to remember why the boy had felt so familiar, why those eyes, that voice, that moment, felt like something unfinished. A long-lost echo, and in that quiet darkness, as the first scene of the film lit up the screen, Timothy's mind wasn't on the role he played. That it was on the boy beside him, and the question that wouldn't let go. Have I seen him before? The premiere ended with a standing ovation, not the kind where everyone claps because they should. This was the kind where something in the room lingers for a beat before hands even move. The kind that's earned, not expected. Timothy stood and bowed with the rest of the cast, flashing a soft smile under the stage lights. But his attention wasn't on the applause. His eyes had already drifted down, to the first row. Noah sat perfectly still, his face tilted slightly upward, absorbing the room like a sponge. He wasn't clapping. He was staring. And when Timothy caught his gaze, Noah smiled so sincerely it almost hurt to look at. The rest of the audience didn't notice the tear that traced Noah's cheek, but Timothy did. Later, backstage, the after-party buzzed like a hive. Crystal glasses. Fast laughter. Rich perfumes and custom suits. PR teams with clipboards and endless checklists. Timothée slipped out early that he wasn't in the mood to be seen. Instead, he found himself wandering through the quiet hallways of the theater, where echoes lived in the floorboards and the walls still held on to last century's applause. That he pulled out his phone and opened notes. Typed one word, Noah, then he paused, and typed another, familiar. That he stared at the screen for a while, then closed it. The next morning, Timothée sat at the breakfast table of his home, untouched coffee steaming beside him. He was scrolling through social media, expecting to see clips, edits, maybe even praise for how he brought Noah onto the carpet, but that's not what stopped him. It was a photo taken by someone across the street of the exact moment he knelt to pick up Noah's fallen poster. In the photo, the camera had caught something Timothée hadn't noticed before: Noah's eyes, looking right at him, unblinking. Full of something deeper than gratitude. Recognition hit him like a wave, not just, "This fan is happy." It was, "I know you." He zoomed in, and he suddenly felt cold. He'd seen that look before. Hours later, he was in a dusty storage closet in his mother's old apartment in New York. The visit was unannounced. His mom wasn't even home. But he still had the key. He rummaged through a plastic storage bin labeled, "Drama Camp 2008. It was mostly junk program booklets, brochures, old disposable camera prints. He flipped through photo after photo until he found it. A grainy image. He must have been 13. Standing on a small stage, his hair wild and his grin uncertain. Beside him another boy, younger by a year or two, holding his hand in the air like they'd just won something. Timothée stared at the photo, slowly turning it over. On the back, in his mother's handwriting, "Timothée and Noah, final show, Camp Larkwood." He blinked, once, twice, then whispered to no one, "Noah." That night, he lay in bed, phone against his chest, lights off. He hadn't spoken to Noah since the premiere. Hadn't asked for contact information. Hadn't realized he would need to, but now he did, because the boy he'd walked down the red carpet with wasn't a stranger. He was someone who'd once called him a friend, and somehow, he had returned. But why, and how had Timothée not recognized him sooner? The questions buzzed louder than sleep. So he picked up his phone and opened Instagram. Noah wasn't tagged in any official posts. But there, in a blurry fan video from the crowd, he caught a glimpse of the boy's jacket. Zoomed in. Noticed a patch on the sleeve. A community name. A care center. He searched it, called. When someone answered, he spoke gently, "Hi. I'm looking for someone named Noah. He was at the premiere last night. He has Down syndrome," and the voice on the other end hesitated. "You mean Noah Fields?" Timothée's breath caught. "Yes." Another pause, then, "He talks about you all the time." Timothée stood in front of the weathered brick building in downtown Pasadena, watching as soft wind rustled the trees overhead. The sign above the entrance read, "Silver Branch Living, Residential Care for Young Adults." It didn't look clinical. No cold metal doors, no rows of gray tiles. Instead, it looked like a house that had grown wiser with time. Slightly crooked blinds, faded porch paint, and laughter echoing from somewhere deep inside. Timothée tightened his coat and walked in slowly, like a man entering a memory. The woman at the front desk smiled before he even introduced himself. "You're the actor," she said gently. "He's been waiting." They led him to a sunlit room near the back. There were no movie posters, no celebrity cutouts. Just books. Drawings. A corkboard covered in Polaroids. And right in the middle of it all, a sketch of two boys on a wooden stage, holding paper swords and smiling with wild, open hearts. Timothy stared at it that he remembered, not just the photo. The moment that he remembered the heat of the summer stage under bare feet, the camp counselor yelling cues off script, the way the younger boy had kept forgetting his lines and laughing anyway. He remembered taking that boy's hand in the final scene, saying, "We win because we believe." And the boy little Noah Fields had shouted back, "And I believe in you." That voice was still in his head that he turned slowly, and there Noah was, standing quietly in the doorway, wearing a bright green t-shirt that said, "My dreams talk louder than my fears." His eyes were the same, wiser now. But still full of light. They didn't speak right away. Then Noah grinned, tilted his head, and said, "Told you I'd see you again." Timothy didn't answer. He just stepped forward and pulled him into a gentle hug, one that didn't ask questions or fill the air with apology. Just held, and Noah hugged back with both arms. Firm. Unashamed, they sat together in the room for over an hour. Noah showed him his art. His books. The script of the camp play which he still kept in a plastic binder. Timothy flipped through the pages, pausing when he saw his own name written in messy, 8-year-old handwriting next to the line, "Timothy says I'm a good actor." He smiled. Noah told him stories about the other kids from camp, some he kept in touch with. Others he just remembered in pictures. He spoke slowly, sometimes mixing words, but never missing the meaning behind them, and finally, he said, "You were the only one who waited for me, when I forgot my lines." Timothy looked at him, surprised. "You remembered that?" Noah tapped his chest. "I remember who is kind." Timothy left the care home just after sunset. The sky was lavender and pale gold, and the air carried the kind of cool that made you notice your breathing. That in his hand, he held a folded drawing Noah had given him. That it was the red carpet. Two figures standing together, one tall, one small. The taller one wore a sparkly jacket. The smaller one held a sign. And over them, drawn in bold crayon letters, were the words, "You didn't walk past me." That night, Timothy canceled all press interviews. His publicist didn't argue. Instead, he called the head of his team and asked only one question: "Can we get a theater for one night? Something small. No cameras. Just real people." There was a pause on the other end, then a quiet, "Yeah. I'll find it." 3 days later, 30 people gathered inside an old neighborhood theater with creaky floors and velvet seats. No spotlights. No red carpet. Just a stage and a single microphone, and in the second row sat Noah, holding a new poster. This one said, "My voice matters." When Timothy stepped onto the stage, he didn't start with lines, that he didn't start with introductions, that he looked out at the room, then at Noah, and said, "Someone once waited for me to speak, and I never forgot how that felt. So tonight I want to hear your voices." Then he stepped aside, and one by one, the audience, young people from centers like Silver Branch, parents, siblings, friends, stepped up and shared their own dreams, their own stories, and the one who went last was Noah. He walked to the microphone, his crumpled script in hand, and delivered his first monologue since Camp Larkwood. There were stumbles, pauses, moments of breath, but no one moved. No one interrupted, and when he finished, the silence was full. Then the room exploded in applause, not polite claps, real ones, and Timothy, he clapped the loudest. Timothy returned to the city with more than he'd left with. Not in the physical sense. He carried no bags, no gifts. But something had shifted in him. Not in a loud, dramatic way. It was quieter than that. He moved differently now, as if something inside him had settled. As if a knot he didn't know existed had finally been untied. Back in his apartment, he stood at the edge of his balcony overlooking the downtown sprawl. The air was still, heavy with heat. But his mind was already elsewhere. It circled around one sentence, not his own. Noah's, I didn't want to forget you, without you knowing I didn't. It hadn't left his chest since he left that room. So, Timothy decided, this wouldn't just be a memory. It would be a beginning point. 2 weeks later, a press release was quietly issued with little fanfare and no photos. Just a few words on his website and a single post on his social feed, coming soon, the Dreamers Stage, a one-night event, written by and for those who've never had a stage of their own, curated by Timothée Chalamet, featuring someone you already love. You just don't know it yet. The venue wasn't grand. Timothy didn't want a concert hall or red carpets or black tie requirements. He wanted it to feel like the first night of summer camp, simple, honest, a room full of people who cared more about truth than perfection. The tickets sold out in under an hour. Noah didn't know it yet that he was told he'd be attending a performance night, with others from Starlight Center. He didn't ask questions. He trusted the people around him. But when the bus pulled up to the small community theater, he squinted through the window and whispered, this looks like a real show. When he stepped inside and saw the stage lights, he paused. He wasn't in the audience. There was a name on the printed program, Final Monologue, Noah Fields. He turned in surprise and found Timothy waiting backstage, dressed in black jeans and a soft gray sweater, holding a folded piece of paper. Noah blinked. You said you'd remember for both of us. Timothy smiled. I did. But I also brought your story so they could hear it from you. He handed Noah the page. Noah opened it. It was his story, every word, exactly how he'd told it weeks before, sitting in that circle of chairs, just the two of them. The show began. The lights dimmed. One by one, performers took the stage. Young people with Down syndrome, autism, anxiety, trauma. All of them telling stories no one had asked to hear before. The crowd cried, laughed, stood in ovation after each one. Then came Noah. He walked onto the stage slowly, blinking at the brightness. He held the paper, but didn't look at it. He didn't need to. He remembered, when I was little, I thought the stage was only for perfect people, people who didn't shake, people who didn't forget lines, people who didn't sound like me. But someone once sat next to me in the dark, and told me a story until the storm passed, and he made me believe I had a voice. So if I forget everything else, I'll still remember this, that even the quietest people deserve to be heard. The room was silent. Then the applause rose like thunder, not from pity, not from sympathy, but from recognition. Noah stepped down, blinking fast, hand clenched over his chest like he was trying to keep the moment from spilling out of him. Timothy was waiting in the wings. They didn't speak, they just hugged, and for the first time, Noah's hands didn't tremble. Later that night, the final photo from the event began circulating quietly online. It wasn't staged. No media had been invited. It was taken by a volunteer in the front row. It showed Timothy, sitting on the edge of the stage beside Noah. No red carpet. No lights, just two friends, and in the caption below, Timothy had written, he didn't forget me. So I made sure no one forgets him. A month passed, then too. The glow from that night, the Dreamers stage, didn't fade. It lived on in whispers, in handwritten letters sent to Timothy's team, in voice notes from parents and siblings who said things like, my daughter now believes she belongs on a stage. My brother hasn't smiled that wide in years. Thank you for proving that dreams don't have to look perfect. But the letter that changed everything arrived without a return address. A small envelope, inside, a note from Noah's mother. Dear Timothy, I don't know how to thank you. What you gave Noah was more than a stage. It was memory. It was pride. It was proof that, even as some things begin to slip away, the part of him that matters most is still seen that he now tells people, I made a room go quiet. And he says it with a smile that doesn't need explanation. He keeps a photo of you beside his bed. But more than that, he says your voice helps him find his own, you gave him a legacy, and I want you to know, that you're part of ours now, too. Timothy folded the note slowly and placed it inside a hardcover journal he hadn't touched in years, the one that still had, on the very first page, a messy scribble from drama camp, you don't have to be the loudest. Just the realest. Noah, he smiled, then closed the book. Weeks later, in the middle of a gray afternoon, Timothy returned to Starlight Care Center.No Press.No schedule, just him and a canvas bag filled with scripts, markers, and snacks that he walked through the doors with ease now, greeted by name by the staff and high-fived by the residents. The community theater was now holding weekly sessions here. No velvet ropes, no curtains, just folding chairs, open hearts, and a circle. Noah wasn't there that day that he was home, his mother said, resting after a long week. But he asked if you'd read something to the group, she added. He said, he trusts your voice. Timothy nodded, and that evening, as the chairs formed a circle and the group quieted around him, Timothy opened a folded page. It wasn't from a film, it wasn't from a script, it was Noah's monologue. He cleared his throat and began, when I was little, I thought the stage was only for perfect people, and as he read, his voice didn't shake, not because he was acting but because he wasn't. Months later, at a small bookstore in Brooklyn, tucked between the shelves of poetry and memoir, sat a slim book. Titled, The Quiet Ones, on the cover, a sketch of a boy with a torn poster, inside, stories written by people who thought their voices didn't matter until someone showed them they did. The book had no author photo. Just a simple dedication on the first page, for Noah, for everyone who waited in silence, you were never forgotten. Some people believe stories end when the spotlight fades, but this one didn't. It began the moment one boy wasn't pushed aside but invited in, and the echo of that moment will keep playing long after the last line is read, because real stories, they don't end, they live. In every heart they change.